Hello, this is a tutorial video for the Edit Time and Attendance function in Employee Tracker. This function allows you to view your employee time cards, edit them, and approve them in preparation for payroll. First, click on the Edit Time and Attendance shortcut in the Daily toolbar. Next, select your employees. You can use the file cabinet here to add or remove employees from the list. Next, check your date range. In general, you'll want to set these dates to be whatever your current pay period is, but you can also widen this date range to view historical or future records. For our example, I'll select a 2-week range in May. When ready, you can click OK or double-click on an employee, and that will take you straight to them first. To start, we recommend maximizing this page so you can see more information on the screen. The employee name here is the employee whose time records will appear in the main part of the screen. You can change the employee by selecting the drop-down menu or by clicking the Next and Previous buttons at the bottom of the screen. If needed, you can also adjust your date range here by double-clicking and adjusting the date. In the top right of the screen, you'll see the record selection box. We recommend always having the time records visible, the time errors visible, and absent records visible. Depending on your company needs, you may also want to check the schedule and the premiums. In a pay period where there's a stat holiday, checkbox the holiday to see stat holiday information. The record selection is essentially a filter for which records will appear at the bottom of the page. If I uncheck time, all of my time records disappear. They're not deleted, they're just not visible. Recheck time, and they reappear. Next, you can also filter by if records have been approved or not approved. In general, you'll want to have both of these checked. But there may be times when you only want to see records that have not yet been approved, like this, or the opposite, only show the records that have been approved. If your employees are scanning more than twice per day or scanning for lunches, you may want to include daily totals. This will provide a daily total line for each day. If your date range includes multiple weeks, you'll probably want to include the weekly totals. This splits the weeks up so you can see the total per week. In the spreadsheet itself, you'll see a number of columns displayed. These can be customized by going to the View menu, selecting Detailed, going to the View menu, and going to Columns. Here you can add or remove columns based on your company needs. The displayed settings are the most commonly used, but can be adjusted. If, for example, you use time banking, you may want to add time banking columns like this. In today's example, I'll remove these. The first column, Type, displays the type of record in the spreadsheet. This is a time record. This is for when an employee works. Other examples include absent records, seen here in red, or error records, seen here in red font. The shift date and work date are usually the same. The main situation when these might be different is if your company uses night shifts. Next, we have the day column, simply indicating the day the transaction took place. Next, we have the shift code. This is generated from the schedule. If there is no schedule, it's generated from the employee default shift from the employee profile. The shift can have an impact on your time calculation. If needed, you can double-click on the shift and select a new shift. The department column indicates where the hours are allocated. Again, this is generated from the schedule. If there isn't a schedule, it will be generated from the employee default shift in the employee profile. If needed, the department can be changed by double-clicking and selecting a new department. The rule column indicates the time calculation rule being applied to the transaction. In general, this rule is generated by the shift. However, it can also be generated from the employee profile. If needed, the rule can be changed here by double-clicking and selecting a new rule. Often this is used if we want to pay an employee more than their standard hours. It can also be used to override overtime that we want to add to the transaction or remove from the transaction. The next two columns are related to absenteeism, absent code, and absent time. You'll only see information here if there's an absent record. For example, here we can see the absent code VAC for vacation and 8 hours of absent time. This too can be overridden or changed by double-clicking and selecting a new code, or double-clicking and entering a new time amount. Next, we have the in and the out times for the transactions. These are the by-the-minute, real-time transactions from your time clock or the employee self-service or whatever time method you're using. Even if you're using rounding, you will see exact minutes here. For example, 9:01, 9:02, 9:03. The in and the out times can be overridden by double-clicking, changing the value, and pushing enter. It's very important to push the enter key, as a tab will not work. You'll notice that as I'm changing these times, the calculation is changed as well, in the time column and the regular column. These two columns are generated from the in and the out times and the rule. In this example, we're using 15-minute rounding, so even if the employee arrives a few minutes late, their time is not deducted, and the total calculated time is rounded to the nearest 15 minutes. The time column displays the total time of the scans. The regular column displays the total time paid at the regular rate. The 1.5 column displays any overtime calculated. While you can't override in the regular column or the 1.5 column, the time column can be used to override total paid time for the day. You could use this to pay an employee more or less hours than what is calculated. For example, you could add the extra 30 minutes if the employee worked through their lunch, or you could remove an additional 30 minutes if the employee took an extra long lunch. The flag column indicates if a record has been calculated with a C or overridden with an O. If you need to reverse the override, double-click on the O and click Yes. This will go back to the calculated time. In this example, there is no overtime, but if I go to another employee, we'll see that they worked an extra day on Saturday. Our overtime rule is set to pay overtime after 44 hours, so anything beyond 44 appears in the 1.5 column. The position column will indicate the position worked by the employee. This would only be used if your company requires positional rates or extra positional information for reporting purposes. If you're not using positions, it's okay to have an NA here for not applicable, or to remove the positions column entirely. Next, we have the employee rate and the total column. The employee rate usually comes from the employee profile. The total column is simply a calculation of the rate times the hours. The rate can be overridden by double-clicking, select Override, enter a new rate, and click Exit. Next, we have 3 columns for approving records. Approving a record is your way of saying that you've looked at a record, you agree with the totals, and you're approving it for the payroll. To approve a record, double-click on the No and click Yes. This changes the note to a yes. You'll see who approved the record and the date and time of the approval. To unapprove a record, double-click on the yes and click yes, and it'll change back to a no. To approve all records on the page for this employee only, go to the Utilities menu in the top left, click Approve All Records, and click Yes. Once a record's been approved, it can no longer be changed. If I try to override the time, I'll be blocked. If you need to make a change, simply unapprove the record, and it will be unlocked. Finally, the Notes column allows you to add any additional notes to any transaction. Double-click in the field, click Add, and enter your note. Your goal in this screen should be to view, edit, and approve all records for the payroll. When this is complete, you can go to the next employee and start the process over. In some cases, you may find an error record. This occurs when an employee misses a scan or you have an odd number of scans in a day, like 1, 3, or 5. To fix an error record, simply double-click in the out time and enter the time desired. This fixes the error record, turns it into a green time record, and it can be approved for payroll. In the event that your employee is missing records, for example, this employee doesn't have anything for the second week, you can manually add time records. Do this by clicking on the Add button in the bottom left. Select the type of record you'd like to add, in this case, time, and click OK. Select the date. Select the shift. You can modify the shift if needed. You can change the department if needed. You can adjust the position if needed. Finally, if you'd like to repeat this record for multiple days, you can enter a number here. A 1 will simply add the record on one day. Any other number will increase the repetition. The result is the same as if the employee had clocked in and clocked out at 9 to 5 on both days. You can also manually add absent records in this page. To do this, click on the Add button, select Absent, and click OK. Select the date, select the absent code. For the absent time, you can double-click to get your default value, in this case 8 hours, and if it's a paid absence, you can also double-click in the pay time. You can adjust these values if a half day is taken or a quarter day, or whatever amount you want. You can adjust these values if a half day is taken or a quarter day, or any amount you need. Just like when adding a time record, you can also use the repeat function to repeat the absence for a number of days. With absent records, you'll notice the absent code being displayed, the absent time for reporting, and the pay time if it's a paid absence. To delete a record, simply right-click and delete. I'll now add an unpaid absence so we can see the difference. Notice that the regular column is blank. This is an unpaid absence. The total column is also 0. Just like the time records, you can add notes to absent records. When everything looks good, approve all records. When all records for all employees are approved, you're ready for the next step, the payroll export. Thank you for watching.